Anishinaabe and Qualicum First Nations, and we thank them for their stewardship of the land and allowing us to all enjoy living, working, and playing in this beautiful part of our island. And also to note that some of us are in orange. Some of us didn't quite get to our cupboards fast enough for Monday's full day recognition of the National Day of Truth and Reconciliation. And I'm sure when Mr. Terpstra and Ms. Wilson give reports, they can speak to some of the activities that are happening in schools this week to lead up to the National Day of Truth and Reconciliation. So I believe there's some things that are going to come in and out of the agenda, but next item is adoption of the agenda as presented or amended. And then I think Trustee Young, you wanted to pull out the Oceanside Building and Learning Together
from the early years from the consent, but we're not at consent yet. And then
it's part of the agenda. So
okay, I have a trustee item.
Yes, we've got Qualicum First Nations bins that you want to talk about.
Right.
And then
there's some corrections as well.
Corrections you think on the with the agenda as amended. Could I have a mover and a seconder, please? Thank you, Trustee Young. Thank you, Trustee Kurland. Seconded, Trustee Kurland. All those in favor? And I'm going to think Julie is in favor. So the consent agenda has been slightly amended with one item being pulled. So could I have a mover and a seconder to accept the consent agenda as presented? Thank you, Trustee Kellogg. Second.
And where is that report going to be discussed? Under trustee items?
Yes, correct.
Okay, yep. Thank you.
Yep. I think that would be the best. Yep. Okay. Thank you, Trustee Young. Trustee Kellogg, Trustee Young seconded. All those in favor? Carried. Now, waiting patiently this evening, we have with us Leanne Sauchuk of our audit team to review with us this evening, trustees, the audited financial statements for the school year 2023-2024. And so I'll turn it over to Ms. Sauchuk.
Thanks. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yeah.
Good. So as Eve mentioned, my name is Leanne Sauchuk. I'm with the district's audit firm, MPS Chartered Professional Accountants, and I'm here to report on the audit we've completed for the district's most recent fiscal year ending June 30th, 2024. I met with the trustees earlier today to review the results of the audit in detail, so my presentation tonight is going to be very brief. There's a complete copy of the financial statements and our audit report in the agenda package for anyone interested in some late night reading, but my presentation here is just going to be very high level overview. Our audit report is included on page 2 and 3 of the financial statements and states that in our opinion, the financial statements present fairly in all material respects the financial position of the school district at June 30th, 2024, and the results of its operations for the year then ended in accordance with the Budget Transparency and Accountability Act of British Columbia. Essentially, what that means is that we did not find any material errors or misrepresentations in the financial statements that were prepared by the district, and as a result, we've issued a clean audit opinion. A couple of very high-level notes on the financial results for the year. The school district had an operating deficit for the year of $428,000. The accumulated operating surplus at the end of the year totaled $1.2 million and has been appropriated for various future use, and that's detailed in note 13 to the financial statements. Operating revenues for the year were $58.9 million and operating expenses were $59.2 million. There's a breakdown of these and more detail provided on Schedule 2 of the financial statements. During the year, the district spent $57.7 million on salaries and benefits, spent $12 million on services and supplies, and $2.9 million on capital projects. There are various schedules and notes within those financial statements. Again, I'm not going to go into detail on them. They're included in the package if anyone wants to look in more detail. The notes will explain some of the figures that are on the financial statements, and the schedules just provide a bit more of a breakdown. There's also a financial statement discussion and analysis, which is also included in your agenda package, which provides a really good summary of the findings for the year. I would like to acknowledge the cooperation of the trustees, management, and staff throughout our audit. They make our job much easier, so we really appreciate that working relationship we have with them, so thank you for that. We did review questions with the trustees earlier today, but if any of the trustees have any further questions since our discussion or that you've thought about since we met, I'd be happy to answer them now. Otherwise, that's my presentation for you this evening.
Thanks very much, Leanne. And trustees, as Ms. Salchuk referenced, we have had an opportunity to chat with her further with more in-depth questions possibly that we had. So would you have any others that you would like to have addressed this evening? I'm afraid Julie's not back yet, but we have the rest of us. Seeing none.
I can wait if you want.
No, that's okay. I think we've had the opportunity as trustees and to do so along with our regular financial reporting by our secretary treasurer, which is very in-depth and to the point. And so seeing no further hands up, thank you very much to you and the firm and the team. And Ms. Olson's not here with you this evening, but you are the two in the faces that we see annually. So we appreciate all the work that your team does, the audit team, when they come in, sit quietly in room 200 and file away through stacks and stacks of paper and boxes of stuff. So thank you very, very much for your support of our district. We appreciate it. And thank you for your presentation this evening. And later in the agenda, we will actually be approving these financial statements as we are required, and then appropriate letters will be signed off for your records and submission then to the ministry and financial places above. So thanks very much. And if you'd love to stay, you're more than welcome to.
Thank you, Leanne,
very much, everyone.
And pass our thanks on to your team.
Yes, I will, for sure.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks. Okay. Seeing no public questions, business arising is none. Could I call on Mount Arrowsmith Teachers Association? And I don't want to take a quantum assumption here, but is Ms. Comer presenting on behalf of Mount Arrowsmith?
Ms. Comer is not.
Okay, who is it? Ms. Katie. Oh, I didn't see
Russell, Miss Katie.
Yeah, you have to forgive my last name on there. It's assigned to my laptop and that's the one it chose. So sorry, not very professional.
That's okay, but wonderful to have you here.
Thank
Ms.
you.
Tickell.
Nice to be here.
Nice to see you. And over to you for a MATA update.
Perfect. Thank you. Good evening. And bonsoir, everyone. And I hope I did a better job than Matt of the French on that. Matt sends his regrets, unfortunately. I'm Katie. Matt is vice president. My pronouns are she, her. And I have the honor of living and playing on the unceded traditional territory of the Snuneymuxw First Nations. They believe in Snowyeth, which is a worldwide view that sees the interconnected relationship between all living things in creation. Seeing this interconnectedness teaches that all things must be honored and respected, for they all have a spirit and purpose, and this guides their daily lives and in the decisions they make as a community. So Snowyeth, I thought that was an interesting tidbit to share with you. First, I want to acknowledge the time provided next Monday for everyone to reflect on Indigenous truth and reconciliation and the calls to action. As a social justice union, we back the initiatives that support increased access for First Nations to learn and grow within our education community. We also support initiatives to increase the hiring of First Nations into leadership roles as support staff, teachers, administrators, and senior administrators. Increasing the representation of First Nations within the K-12 public education sector is an achievable goal. Our Truth and Reconciliation Chair, Amanda Young, is looking forward to working with Indigenous district leadership, together with Snuneymuxw and Qualicum Nations, to build relationships that can further enhance First Nation participation in education. Second, all of us at this meeting can recall those teachers that have positively impacted us or have inspired us to become who we are today. And a reminder that it's World Teachers Day on October 5th. As the day is on Saturday this year, MATA will be visiting schools on Friday, October 4th to leave appreciation gifts in staff rooms and to thank our teachers for all their hard work, commitment, and dedication to supporting and teaching our students. Third, as a provincial election is fast approaching, MATA will be hosting an all candidates forum on October 9th from 4 to 5 p.m. This forum will be virtual, where the candidates will be asked questions that have been submitted by MATA members, as well as other stakeholder questions. There will be an opportunity to ask some questions at the end of the discussion. And to date, Stephanie Higginson, who is the NDP candidate, and Adam Walker, who's the independent candidate, have committed to the forum. A link will be sent out a little bit closer to the date. Fourth, this is the local bargaining year for MATA and the employer, and we look forward to our bargaining sessions with senior management. Last round, we had very respectful, productive bargaining and look forward to continuing that dialogue to improve our system. We're in the process of choosing our bargaining dates with the employer that will be between November and February. Finally, the FESL report as presented will be sent to the ministry. As this document is not a living document and as such does not reflect our current situation, it should be noted that many of the positive initiatives that are highlighted in the report may find themselves cut in order to balance the budget. It's unfortunate that the district has found itself in a budget deficit at the start of the school year. Budget deficits mean cuts within the system. Most often, the items that get cut are the resources that directly support students, teachers, counselors, learning service supports, and special programs, as well as EAs, clerical support, and school budgets. We know that cuts to these items have significant effects on children's learning. Making decisions to maximize class size within schools may feel like the fiscally responsible thing to do. However, those maximized class sizes, coupled with more students with higher academic and behavior needs, the pressure for teachers to provide individualized learning experience for their students, decreased EA support, and cuts to basic school budgets does not create an optimal educational environment. The public education system is underfunded, period. The current model of funding is a flawed model, and Mount Arrowsmith Teachers Association would hope and expect that trustees bring this to the attention of the Ministry of Education and Childcare. Despite press releases that state huge amounts of money being spent on public education, the fact is, as a percentage of BC GDP, we are spending half as much as we were 30 years ago when inflation is factored in. BCTF research indicates education used to be 22% of the provincial government spending, and now it is 11%. It has not increased, whereas inflation has drastically. We are a system needing to do more with less. We are a system that has space for every learner. We are inclusive and accept all learners despite their needs, and we go above and beyond to create the best learning environments we can. But this takes funding. Private and independent schools have the ability to pick and choose their clientele, and thus have the ability to turn away higher needs students because they know that they will cost more. For example, CBC News reported an autistic student in Nanaimo who is also blind and has epilepsy has not yet started kindergarten as there is no qualified EAs in their system to meet his needs. When 0.6% of our student enrollment contributes to a deficit of $700,000 to $800,000 of lost revenue, that is a flawed funding system. When employee sick leave has no direct ministry funding and districts are forced to cut student services so that employees can stay healthy, that is a flawed funding system. When parents are having to pay school fees and DPACs are having to fundraise to support programs and provide resources in their schools, that is a flawed funding system. We need to do better, and we need to set our funding priorities to those that directly support students. Applying the First Nations Snowiath belief to speak of the impact of a decision means to view the impacts holistically and how everything is connected and relates to one another. We urge all stakeholders that believe in public education to be vocal and pressure government to invest in public education. A learning environment that is well funded and supported is a learning environment that is good for students. Thank you. Merci. Hi, Sepka.
Thanks, Mr. Kells, and we look forward certainly to the link for sure of the all candidates meeting. So please, hopefully, make sure we're all on your mailing list for that. And
yes,
I'm sure
definitely be sharing that with you.
And I'm sure you already know that Stephanie Higginson was previously the president of the BC School Trustees Association. She should know about education. That being said, thank you. Canadian Public Employees, Local 3570, Mr. Rycroft.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We are deeply concerned about the current state of affairs at our school. There are several issues that need to be addressed, including precarity of our members' positions, the safety and inclusion of our students, and the management's decision to recoup their deficit from support staff paychecks and student support. The lack of replacement for educational assistants and other staff members is putting unfair pressure on both our children and our employees. The workload for our staff has been increasing with additional demands for paperwork and reduction in clerical positions directly affecting our librarian hours. The lack of consultation with clerical employees about the changes to their roles is unacceptable, and they are being expected to do more with less time. Further to the decision of not replacing EAs on the first day of absence is causing additional stress and pressures on the remaining staff and depriving students of access to an equitable and inclusive education. This has particularly negatively impacted on most of our marginalized and vulnerable students and their families. It is also troubling that management is looking to make up for a deficit this short in the school year by cutting resources from the classroom and student body, particularly when they have previously stated that they would minimize the impact on students. This decision disappointingly affects those who may not have a voice, and it is unacceptable. Additionally, the district's policy regarding busing are also problematic, as they are resulting in special needs students missing out on instructional time and inclusive education opportunities. This disregard for these students needs to have a wider implications for their families and the community. The needs of our students and employees are not being given priority they deserve. I strongly believe that management should reconsider their decision and prioritize the well-being and support of the students and staff. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Rycroft. And now, DPAC, our new incoming president, Mr. Ray Warniak. Do you have comments for us this evening? Welcome and congratulations on your election.
Thank you. And thank you for this opportunity to report. We had our first DPAC meeting in person at the Qualicum Commons. We found the old name tags. I don't know if you remember the ones that used to sit on the desk with the school on them. That brought back a lot of memories from the Roller Coop days, and it was a good icebreaker. It brought back memories and a good conversation. Our meeting lasted 3 hours. It was a long one. This year we have a different agenda format where each meeting, we as a group are going to brainstorm ideas to be presented at this DPAC report to the board. And we'll also brainstorm information request items for our next DPAC meeting. So information request items are topics we would like the Qualicum School District staff, trustees, and unions to inform DPAC on at DPAC meetings. So the information request items will be provided to staff, trustees, and the unions a couple of weeks before the DPAC meetings, providing time to prepare the information. DPAC voted to hold hybrid meetings this year and to buy a Teams account in hopes it will help more parents learn and become comfortable with the technology that our school district uses. And DPAC acknowledges parents and families have diverse schedules. We also understand the majority of parents are available in the evenings, and that's why DPAC meetings tend to be around 6 to 7 p.m. We also clearly understand parents are more interested in the discussion and rationales to decisions. This is how parents learn and stay better informed. How and why decisions are made is significantly more important than what decisions are made. This is the information parents want. For parents, simply reading our DPAC meeting minutes is inadequate and an outdated way to keep interested people up to date and included. To be as inclusive, transparent, and informative as possible to all parents, DPAC will be recording our meetings and sharing our recordings to allow all parents equal access to our discussions, information, and to be included inclusively into how and why we make our decisions. The rationale of decisions is of the utmost importance, not the outcome. Providing the rationale behind these decisions is inclusive, transparent, and most importantly, informative. We believe well-informed parents will create more trust and understanding and less conflict and questioning. Better informed parents and PACs will be more united and willing to work together. We have elections at our October meeting for Vice President, Treasurer, Secretary, and Directors at Large. We have nominations to fill every position and look forward to working with staff, trustees, union, and parents in this upcoming year. The Oceanside Commons Society spoke as a delegation at our last meeting. DPAC voted to support the Ocean Commons Society proposal and will be writing a letter of support to the trustees. DPAC's happy to hear Matt is hosting an all candidates debate, and we'd like to express our appreciation. So thank you, Matta, and thank you to everyone for listening to the DPAC report.
Thanks, Ray. Appreciate your update and that we can. We always send a trustee, and to have the questions or queries and information that you would like us to contribute a couple of weeks in advance would be most appreciated, as we do have busy schedules with other committee functions, and we look forward to your elections in October. Action items for this evening, trustees. First off is our financial statements, of which we have had a lead in from our auditors. This is page 26 to 72 in your package this evening, and we have a couple of separate motions this evening to address Indigenous education funding, internally restricted funding, capital, and then we'll actually get to the statements, but I'll ask our Secretary Treasurer, Mr. Amos, to give us a lead off on our first motions.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. And just understanding that these three precursor motions are what the audited financial statements were prepared for. So again, recognizing that the Indigenous education targeted funding is targeted funding that the ministry gives school districts for Indigenous education. And the mandate is, because it's targeted, it has to be spent in that domain. And therefore, if districts, through their budget process, through their financial statements, did not spend it all in 1 year, the mandate is obviously to carry forward those funds into the new budget year with the intent of spending it within that 24-25 fiscal year. So really, this is about the accounting for the targeted funding for Indigenous education.
Would you like us to deal with that one first?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
I think if we do lockstep, and I'll explain as we go along.
Okay.
It'll put rationale against each motion.
Okay. So trustees, we have a two-part motion to this, that the Board of Education request approval from the Ministry of Education to underspend targeted Indigenous education funding for the 23-24 school year in the amount of $104,931, and that the Board of Education confirm that the surplus has been allocated and will be spent in the Indigenous education programs in the 2024-2025 fiscal year. Do I have a mover? Thank you, Trustee Young. Seconder, Trustee Kellogg. This is, as Mr. Amos has said, a standard procedure for us. Although I don't recall having seen many transfers over year to year, we have certainly had them in the past. And do trustees have any questions of Mr. Amos and the moving of the Indigenous education funds to the following year, unspent? Trustee Young.
My understanding is that there were some funds that were not spent because there was a change in the leadership of the Indigenous services, and so there was a period of transition. That was my understanding of the rationale, but others can chime in on that.
Superintendent Jory.
Yep, I reached out to District Principal Katie Marin just for some confirmation. You remember we had a teacher in the department that was brought into acting vice principal role. Actually, that wasn't hired until partway through the year, and then was brought into an acting vice principal role, which shifts that that budget away from Indigenous education. She cited two other positions, one where a person retired and they were not able to find a replacement, and another where they were looking for the right person and it took a while to hire, I think. So there's basically three situations there where they weren't able to spend the entire budget on the staffing that they had planned to, but she has promised me via text that they're going to spend it all next year. So that's your
Yeah.
quick overview.
Great. And I believe Mr. Amos said this is a $930,000 commitment and targeted funding that's given to this district on an annual basis. Is that correct?
Correct. That's the total budget that we get in targeted funding,
Right,
correct,
funding.
of which 100,000 is going to be carried forward. Yeah.
So that gives folks context of what 1/10 is on the table still from previous activities. Any other questions, trustees? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? That's carried. Thank you very much. Okay, internally restricted funds, Mr. Amos.
Right. And so this pertains to note 13 in the financial statements, which speaks to the accumulated surplus. And again, recognizing the ministry's prescription of making sure that allocated surplus are not only board motion, i.e. that the board is aware of the allocated surplus, but also obviously dealing with the note that's in the statements. And so again, this is money that's in our operating surplus that allows us to carry forward, in a sense, some funding for various projects. So again, embedded in that note 13 are the school budgets for 49,597, capital maintenance carry forward budget of 53,214. Again, and I won't belabor it, but software goes in there, Indigenous education, which is a previous motion we just talked about, as well as putting a line item in there for appropriated for future operating budgets, so that there's always going to be money in a reserve fund between 2 and we talk about 1 to 4% of the annual operating expenses should be set aside. We're at the low end of that, but again, point being, that's where we indicate that there is funds set aside for future years for a total of 1.2 5,503. And again, that's really just addressing how the accumulated surplus is being dispersed.
Thanks, Mr. Amos. So before you this evening, trustees, the recommendation of the Board of Education, School District 69, accept the schedule of internally restricted surplus as presented in note 13 of the financial statements. Could I have a mover and a seconder, please? So moved, trustee Kurland, seconded trustee Kellogg. Are there any questions, trustees? Seeing none, all those in favor? Carried. Thank you very much. Use of remaining local capital. And this is the White Fleet piece, Mr. Amos.
Yeah, so again, from Schedule 4, which speaks to the other capital funds that we have. And so local capital is funds that we get through remaining unspent bylaw capital, as well as money spent or money received for the sale of land and buildings kind of thing. So reminding the board that about 6 years ago, we had a couple of parcels of property. We were able to sell them through the board and through the ministry. That money created a small local capital fund that we've been kind of using over the course of the last number of years, reminding that some of those funds were used to kickstart the Bolinas Track project, a $200,000 contribution from the board to kickstart that, to seek community use or community funds. And likewise, we've also put some money into the White Fleet, of which I'm asking the board to spend the remaining, if you want, of that $137,997 for the White Fleet purchases that we did.
Thanks, Mr. Amos. Okay, number 3, that the Board of Education, School District 69 Qualcomm support using the remaining balance of local capital in amount of 137,997 for purchase of white fleet vehicles. Could I have a mover and a seconder, please, trustees? Thank you, Trustee Young, second Trustee Kellogg. Any questions, trustees? Seeing none, all those in favor? Carried. And last but not least, a complete package of the audited financial statements that our auditors have reviewed with us in a couple occasions. I would move that the Board of Education, School District 69 Qualicum, approve the 2023-2024 audited financial statements as presented. Could I have a seconder, please? Thank you, Trustee Kurland. Any further comments, trustees? Seeing none, call a question. All those in favor? Carried. Thank you very much. So on to appointment of auditors. As trustees will remember, we did a request for proposal a number of years ago, and we did an analysis of the audit process. There was an extension piece of the appointment of our auditors, to which we are at that point now. And I would move that the Board of Education, School 69, extend the appointment of McLean, Pazika, Sauchuk, Chartered Professional Accountants as the district auditors for a 2-year term for the 24-25, 25-26 fiscal years. Could I have a seconder, please? Thank you, Trustee Kurland. And Trustee Young, you have a question.
Yes,
Comment.
it's my usual question about auditors, because I know this is, our auditors, I think, do an excellent job, but it's always a good idea to kind of get a sense of how long they've been doing that job and whether we're ready again to start looking far and wide for somebody who can do that job. So I would direct that through you, Madam Chair, to the to Mr. Amos. Like I say, I'm happy with what they're doing. I think they're a local company and they're big enough to do this, but I do want to ask the question.
Yes, a number of years ago, it would be, I believe it was 3. We did a very extensive request for proposals. I had other financial firms, KPMGs, and your notables that you would know, and we, because we wanted to do just as you said, search out whether the field could produce any different type of opportunities for us. We settled on what was then known as McGorman McLean, has now had different partners brought into the process, and this was a 3-year contract with a 2-year extension, and I would anticipate in the 24-25 prior to 25-26, it would behoove this board to do another request for a proposal for auditors, because that has been our practice. Mr. Amos, do you wish to add?
Not particularly. You're absolutely, you got all the numbers right. 3 + 2. We did again, extensive extensive RFP, 3 firms. The local firm was awarded it after, again, much consultation. We had a committee that sort of looked at each proposal kind of thing. And so it is a fairly
Robust
is the word. Yeah. Process. And again, we did get a good 5 years out of them. And absolutely the cycle will continue after the 25-26 again, recognizing that we will do it prior to the year. So in the year of 25-26, obviously we will do another RFP and see what we get.
The penultimate year.
And this has nothing to do with, obviously, we're very happy with the work that the audit firm does for us. It really is just about our due diligence in terms of keeping it refreshed, keeping the teams refreshed, and making sure that we are getting value, not just value for money, that we don't, that we're transparent in terms of who we're having, because you don't want an audit team doing it for too long, where you sometimes get into trouble with getting too close, I guess.
And we are a small town. We know that. Trustee Austin, you did have your hand up, your hands down. You're okay. Okay. Are there any further questions, trustees? Seeing none, I'll call a question. All in favor? Barry, I'm hoping you got your hand up because you seconded it. Thank you. Carried. On to our information items in this evening, and always exciting reporting to be done at this time of year by Superintendent Dr. Jory on our Fessel report, but it is a bit later, so I can't steal a thunder on that yet. So we won't do that yet. Sorry. So your other superintendent's report, Dr. Jory.
Yes, the non-Fessel. Hello, everyone. Thanks. Yeah, thanks, Chair. Thanks, everyone. Hello, Esquale, bonjour. Happy September to all of you. Schools are open, staffing is in place, buses are running, and we are back at it. It's been great to see the smiling faces of students and staff out in our buildings, and we are now in the flow of learning. Last year, I repeated some of the comments I heard about best startup ever, which were nice to hear. And while I haven't heard that specifically in my travels this year, generally speaking, things look and sound to be going well around the district. One of the topics in the news for startup was the new cell phone legislation for our schools. We had spent quite a bit of time talking about this through the spring, and then our school principals and their staff have been hard at work rolling it out. So far, here it is going quite well. I was in Bolinas the other day when they were in session, and actually I had to remind myself to look for them. They just weren't out, I had to look hard before I even saw a single one, and it's possible that single cell phone was actually being used for schoolwork. This is all quite promising. I think it's important to give credit to the adults and the students for moving this along, so kudos, everyone. Last year at this time, the topic of the day was the anti-SOGI protests. As you might recall, I made a rather impassioned speech about the need to push back against misinformation, make sure that we are being transparent and open, curriculum and the resources with any parent who expresses an interest or concern. I certainly have spent significant time responding to emails and meeting with groups on this topic, wearing everyone down with logic and facts as I see it. I will concede that we are now up to just one book that has contained content that the adult staff agreed to be beyond elementary age, and that book was removed from a library shelf. I am meeting with teacher librarians soon just to touch base on this issue and make sure we're all on the same page, pardon the pun, and that we're making sure the 10-year-olds are not getting the books intended for teenagers, just to be even more sure. However, I was especially pleased to see the second round of the so-called Million Man March was short by a few decimal places. There are no protests here in Parksville that we know of. Are people coming to their senses on this issue? Let us hope so. There is a bit of a dark cloud over us in regard to enrollment and of the funding that is directly related to that enrollment. Last year, we expected to be level in our numbers, then actually went up about 1%. This year, we saw some indicators that caused us to be quite cautious, and we projected to be down 1%. And now it looks like we'll be down, well, 1.5% and maybe even 2%. Soft enrollment has been noted around the province and the island, perhaps as families wait for one or two more interest rate drops before they make that move west. More significantly, a private special needs program has recently become accredited, and a number of parents and caregivers of students who qualify for supplementary funding have elected to give this program a try. The combination of these two factors is looking at this point to total just about 1.2 million, a million of which we are trying to find right away. This has resulted in some September staffing adjustments. Note that we have tried to limit the majority of these reductions to the rescinding of new postings to keep the disruptions to a minimum. Here they are in summary. Teaching staff reallocations, reductions, and non-replacements, 420,000. Reductions to EA hours, ostensibly jobs, 300,000. The communication position has been surplused at the central office, and we have a further non-replacement in finance, that's 100,000. Operations and maintenance restructuring and supply reductions, 100,000. ISP school allocations are being held back at 70,000, and education operational budget reductions at about 50,000, and perhaps somewhat more if we include some IT supplies. One of the questions that is often asked in times like this is, where are the exempt staff? Well, that's a fair question. The answer is a simple one. Exempt staff have contracts that would have to be paid anyway, so they do not offer any short-term budget relief. The time to consider these reductions are during long-term forecasting and alignment, preferably with a retirement and other departures. Work, which has been ongoing. We have reduced exempt staff in the last year and a half, and we will continue to keep that top of mind in this district anytime funding is not secure. There are two things I want to point out, neither of which may land well with everybody on the call. The first one is that the Qualicum School District puts a very high percentage of its budget into education staffing relative to other districts of a similar size. Central positions are fewer than typical here. Professional development budgets are comparatively frugal. Operations funding has been tight, and our surplus is, quite frankly, about half what it really should be. The money is out there, believe it or not. I know it doesn't seem like that all the time, but it is. This means when we have a dip in funding, there really isn't anywhere else to go. We need to reduce out there. And as all of you know, in the last few years, our staffing replacement costs have risen from 1.4 million to more than 2.4 million, which is also an unfunded cost to the district. Responsibility suggests that we need to respond to this issue, and we are experimenting with our communication strategies and replacement protocols in an effort to get these costs somewhat back in check so we have more money to put on the ground out there. I do agree that historically, education funding has been austere, and this recent year has been a bit more of a challenge yet. But we are compelled when we are working in this environment to make do with what we have. And so that is what we are endeavoring to do. The second comment is about how we present ourselves to the public. Our district is quite high functioning. We are dealing with large issues thoughtfully. Our strategic plan is moving forward. Our achievement profile is admirable. And like I said, we put our money into classrooms. Well, I would be the first to admit we can always do better. We do pretty well, thank you very much, pretty darn well. So it kind of rankles me when people who eat at this table, so to speak, are quick to criticize or complain, especially without complete or accurate information. Please understand that when you do that in public and you are heard by a parent or caregiver who may be on the fence as to where they school their child, that you just might be talking them into homeschool or NIDES or a private program. Fewer students lead to fewer employees. Ponder that, please, before you share your thoughts publicly on matters you might not fully understand. And please, if you do have these issues, there's lots of venues to do that in, and please try to do that respectfully. Finally, as mentioned last month, the writ, as it has been called, dropped provincially on September 21st. We will go through several weeks of interregnum, which means we don't have a fully functioning BC government during this time period. Voting will take place October 10th to 19th, and a new government will be formed on the 2nd of November. Get out there and vote, everyone. This one could be pretty impactful. Thank you again to everyone out there who supports learning directly or indirectly for your great work and for looking after the students in the Qualicum School District. I Sept, everyone. Thank you. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you, Dr. Jory. Any comments, trustee, about Mr. Jory's comments this evening? All thoughtful and profound and worth us all pondering at length. Seeing none. Preliminary enrollment report. Ms. Wilson, Associate Superintendent Wilson.
Good evening, everyone. I think Superintendent Jory has touched on our enrollment. We did our trial run, which is our 1701, which is our trial run where all of the data that's in our system as of last week caused us to be concerned around being off for our projections, as Superintendent Jory discussed. So we are looking at how we can right-size that budget now versus looking at later. This Friday is the day when our count is what really matters. It used to be the 30th, but now it is the 27th. Schools are working really hard to make sure that students who might have a designation that are new to our community have the correct paperwork in there, and that we are making sure we can claim the students in our system that might need some supplemental supports in some way. We're making sure that all of our students whom are out and not yet registered are connecting. We had a meeting on Friday with all of our principals from our high school, as well as our alternate program and our social worker. And our social worker is working with the Island Health outreach grant that we got last year with some child and youth care workers to connect with students who might not have shown up at school yet. So I really want to give credit to our system who's working really hard to make sure we're not missing any students for the right reasons. We want them connected in school, but also to support our enrollment. Schools are working really hard. And next board meeting, we will have the final numbers. It will be the 1701s will be complete, and we'll be able to give the exact numbers of what we've got in each of our schools.
Thanks, Ms. Wilson. Trustee Young, you have a question.
Yeah, just I was walking with a friend the other day, and I got to explaining how the funding works and the fact that, you know, we have this count in September, and that's what we get our funding based on. And then there's another count later in the year, and I couldn't remember. Is it February?
February.
Yeah. And they adjust. But if somebody comes in on October the 4th with a lot of needs, say, we don't have the funding that covers that off, but we cover it off because we fund according to people's needs. So I guess I'm speaking to parents. If you know of people who are kind of like, oh, well, maybe my kids will go to school, maybe I'll homeschool them, could you please encourage them to consider coming into schools before that 26th date so that you know, we can get the money to support them. So if anybody's on the fence out there and you hear about it, please help us with that. And I'll defer to Jillian Wilson for her comments on that.
Ms. Wilson?
I think one of the things that I want to comment in respect to that, Trustee Young, is that you have been a board, we are a district who supports students where they're at. And whether a student has a designation that is a designation by the ministry standards or not, and they present as having some needs, we support children. And our staffs do amazing work around that. It is funded this current way in terms of supplemental funding comes in to the community, to the district, based on the designations. I also want to acknowledge that this is a board that is supported a higher ratio than contractually obligated to for counseling, for learning support. So we have gone above and beyond the contract because this is what the board has believed in terms of what they wanted to do to support students. And that's come from the field and come from teachers. It's come from your senior administration talking about it. And I recognize we might have to do some things different because of how we are, where our budgets currently are, but it's always been a system that supported children, and our staff do that.
And this board has supported that philosophy for well over a decade or more. I can attest to that much.
It's certainly a philosophy that I support as well. There's no question about that. But if anybody doesn't have a child in school and wants to think about coming, we could sure accommodate them.
Seeing no further questions, I'll move on then to the educational programs tag team of Director of Instructions, Mr. Terpstra, and again, Associate Superintendent Wilson to give us our educational programs update.
So I took my mic off first this month, so I'm going to go first. One of the things that I'm working on recently, and it's really exciting for our community, is the Integrated Child and Youth team. And I've shared with you before, they called it the ICY. It's not named IC, it is the ICY. Is an integrated team that stems out of the Pathway of Hope. And I've got a little bit of a presentation that I'd like to share with you, if I may. So I'm hoping I can share a screen here that gives you a little bit of background of where the Pathway of Hope developed the ICY and how we fit into that. So let me just share my screen with you here. So you should see.
Yep, got the small version of it.
You got the small version. Just give me one second here. There we go.
Visually challenged.
There we go.
Yeah.
So this is the Pathway of Hope, which is a roadmap around making mental health and addictions for care for better BC. And so if you look at this big chart here, this is all the Pathway of Hope. And the integrated child and youth teams are just one small component of this particular pathway. And so we are a district that this past year, our community, I should say, because it's not just district funding, that we're part of phase 3 in the pathway in terms of creating the ICY teams. They are community based. It's about providing wraparound services and support for children and youth. It's to make it easier for children and youth to be able to connect. And the team members we've got a really collaborative community who work really well together. This is pushing us one step further to actually integrate the supports that we provide for children, youth, and families. So this is what an ICY team looks like. So children and youth at the core, at the center of the thought, center of the team. There's different community agencies and community supports. We have a mental health service. We have school district employees, and the school district employees that will be part of this particular team will be a clinical counselor and a peer support worker. And we also have substance use and then any other ICY members that might be in play. Here. You can see the idea around an ICY is to make sure the child's always in the center. One of the things that they're recognizing is it's really difficult for children or youth to be able to receive support where they have to keep going back and sharing the same story over and over again with different people. So the ICY is about wrapping around that support, and teens, youth don't have to keep sharing their stories. The ICY provides support for all children and youth in the community. It's not just for school district children. It could be for a 19-year-old. It could be for a child that is part of an independent school. It could be for any child or youth in our community, and they don't have to be attending Qualicum School District. There's a little bit more information around they work towards making sure that it's culturally safe. There is an Indigenous education support person that is connected. And you can see here, and I hadn't realized this until we were talking about it at one of our meetings the other day, that there's only 3 waves or 3 phases, and we were in the last phase. They're not doing anymore. So this is the 20 communities that are currently part of that have an ICY. You can see it started in 21-22 with the first 5 that were called the pioneers, and they developed a lot of the processes and protocols that we are all following now through trial and error. Last year was a little bit bigger, and then this is the last group that just came on, and that's it. We are the last phase to come on board, and there's not going to be any more ICYs being developed across the province. In terms of startup, this is where I'll show you the next chart because it actually helps a little bit better. So this is the idea around how we implement the phases of the ICY to get up and running. We were given an announcement. I'm really pleased to say that we've gone through phase 1 and phase 2. We're in the phase 3 stage. We've actually hired our team lead, and we're really fortunate that the team lead that we've hired was involved in the ICY over in Port Alberni in the Pacific Coast. So we've got her expertise coming to us, and it was her first day on Monday. She came to present to our council's meeting last week, which was great that she shared with them before she even started work here, who she is and what she's bringing to our community. So we're really looking forward to working with her. The next step is to hire our 2 employees, which will be the clinical counselor and the peer support worker. And then Island Health will continue to hire the substance use, the work with the Indigenous, as well as the clerical position for the whole team. They're going to be working out of Winchelsea Learning Centre. We're also connected with Family Smart, so there'll be a family support worker, and what that family worker is somebody who has gone through experiences as a family to be able to support their child and youth with mental health or addictions, and so they provide the peer support to other families. So it's a work in progress. It's a big team. It's lots of work. It's a wonderful resource that we're getting for our community. So I just wanted to share a little bit more as I'm learning more. And I'll keep you informed as we move down this journey for our community. So that's the ICY. The other thing that I wanted, sorry.
Can I just quickly ask, and then I'll get to Trustee Young as well. Is there any jeopardy of this being not continued if the government changes?
That was one of the questions that was asked by one of our counselors at the counselors meeting. And there's so much been invested in this, and it is big monies. And the comment that came back was, this is going to look good no matter which government is in. We have a crisis with substance use. We have a crisis with mental health. And so this has been a really the amount of procedures and practices and policies that they have in play to be able to make sure the structures are there for each community that's starting their ICY. It's really well thought out. So the answer was highly unlikely, but one never knows, but it's certainly not. Yeah.
No. Okay. Yeah. That would be unfortunate if it was in jeopardy. Trustee Young.
Yes, it would be very unfortunate. So I read the Pathways to Hope document quite a while ago, and just that little piece that you showed me, it reminded me about the foundry system. Mm-hmm. And I know that Nanaimo was going for a foundry, and I don't think they got it. So could you, because this is just one part of the whole big puzzle of how we're dealing with this, but I know that a lot of those communities may have foundries that don't have ICYs, or how does that all work together? Help me.
That's a bigger conversation, I think, than our conversation for the board meeting here. And I also want to acknowledge our community has not given up on looking up how a foundry can support our community too. And that is work that the Oceanside Health Network is doing, as well as OCRC. The Oceanside Collaborative Response Committee is also working on that. So I know that they are not opening the doors for looking at other communities to have a foundry as of yet, but we are in communication with people who have developed foundries and also working towards how do we get one and be ready for one next time they open the doors for that. So we have ICY right now, and that's great. Yeah. The other thing that I wanted to share is that Foundry. If you recall, last year we applied to Virtual Foundry to see if we could be part of their Preventure program, and we were a successful district. And so we are doing our training for Preventure, and Preventure is a drug awareness resiliency strategies to be able to support based on your personality tendencies. You get to have some group work and build strategies so that you can have some better refusal skills. So our counselors are being trained at the secondary schools, the facilitators. We've got some district folks that are going to be what are called champions. And then our child and youth care workers are going to be called workshop aides, where they can support the groups that are going to do the Preventure curriculum. What happens is we're running it through all of our grade 8s. So our grade 8s will be, I'll use the word screened. I don't particularly like that word. I'm not sure which other word to use at the moment. It's a 5-minute quick assessment to see what your tendencies are, whether you're someone who's more anxious, someone who's more of a risk taker. And based on your tendencies, then you will see whether you qualify to be able to be part of a group or a workshop format. And then the workshop will take place based on those personality tendencies. So we're looking forward to how that's going to support some of our students making different decisions for themselves and being informed in terms of building some resiliency. The training starts next week for our counselors, the middle of October for our workshop aides, and then we're hoping to do the screening part for all of our grade 8s prior to Christmas, with the workshop facilitated sessions to take place between after the winter break and before March or just into April there. So that's our plan for this year. Our alternate program is going to use the concepts of it, but not run the students through it. We want to support our alternate program students, but based on how they work their programs, we felt that it would be better to do it this way. And when we mentioned that to Foundry the other day, they were really excited about our project that we were going to work with our alternate program in Preventure. So that's great. Of importance is our truth and reconciliation. And you can see us all wearing orange today, and we're all doing our piece. And I know we all think about what we can do as individuals to make sure we're on our own personal journeys around truth and reconciliation. One of the things that I think that we're doing really well is we're really looking at how we can have the support of our Indigenous Education Department to help teach, train, support, educate all of us. And even the simple things as, not so simple, learning the Hul'qumi'num language at each one of our administration meetings. Katie is walking us through making us practice enunciations and using the correct words. And I really have a hard time with my enunciation of the language. It's really challenging for me, but she's pushing us all through it. So that's a little thing, but it's a huge thing that we're recognizing that we need to do better and get better at it. In our schools today, I was in Springwood Elementary School, and the whole school smelt of bannock as students were walking around handing trays of bannock to every single classroom. I walked into the home economics lab, and I don't know how many students were in there, and I don't know how many adult volunteers, and I think there was some that are on the line here today helping out make bannock in terms of looking at what different cultures we can be supporting our students to make sure they're informed and educated. And so it's not just a day in our schools, it's a number of days. We've got one school that's seeing how many times people can wear orange shirts through the month of September. We have the big map coming into Springwood Elementary School on Friday, and the RCMP is bringing that in, and they're doing classes to go into the gym with the huge map. And I don't know if you've ever seen that map, but if you haven't, please go by Springwood this Friday. It's overwhelming to see the amount of space that Indigenous peoples were given for reserve. It's terrible when you look at the vastness of Canada and you see it in that big map, and then you see the space that were given to Indigenous communities. So it's embarrassing. It's quite overwhelming. At Bellina Secondary School, they've done some work with Katie and Jesse around learning about the story of Craig Bay. And so they're doing some assemblies around the local knowledge and what Craig Bay's history is, and invited Winchelsea Learning Center over to do some of that learning with them. So they're, again, learning about that. Listening to our ancestors is a theme at Arrington Elementary School, and they've been using that book for the last couple of years, and they continue to go deeper in that. They've got an assembly as well as wearing orange shirt. I was in one classroom the other day, and a Bowser, and they were making orange shirt T-shirts out of orange paper and writing and making sure that they were using some symbols of local nations to be able to represent their T-shirt and what that meant to them. We've got lots of work. That's just a little snippet of what's going on across our community this week and this month to make sure that we're working on truth and reconciliation. And it's not just a once and done, it's a journey that we're all on. And I feel really proud of what our leaders are doing and what our classroom teachers are doing, what our schools are doing to make sure it's not just a one-time thing, but it's activities going on throughout the year. And that's it.
Whoa. Amazing. Thank you, Associate Superintendent Wilson. And we have a question for Trustee Austin.
That was a lot of amazing stuff. I'm just wondering, to harken back to sort of last school year and the project that was being undertaken at UBC, the Healthy Minds, and if that can at all be tied into the ICY or Foundry projects?
That's through the chair. That's a really good question. And if I say I'm a little bit disappointed in the outcome of the app, I'm a little bit disappointed in the outcome of the app. I think that it was the research project it tried, and then it kind of fizzled towards the end there, and our students gave that feedback, and I'm not sure where it went. So whether they'd finished their research part and they're now have their PhD and they've moved on or something. I am not sure. I don't think the app itself is something that should lose its hope. I don't know where it went to, but I'm not sure. I'm not sure.
That's too bad. Yeah, that's too bad. But there's still students who would be at school. It would maybe chase some things down or help chase things down. Does Director of Instruction, Mr. Terpstra, have extra comments?
Yeah, I'll just
don't
related
see you.
to what
There you are.
related to what Associate Superintendent Wilson reported, just reminding all of our educators and thank our trustees who are also joining us for learning with and about and from the nations, a 4-part learning series, and really, again, a act of learning about our local nations and an act of reconciliation for people out there. We're excited to move forward in our learning and literacy and numeracy, reminding everybody that October also brings FSAs. And so we're excited to, let our students show their learning. And we will gather as educators and actually as administrators starting off October. Vice Principal Mark and I are going to do a data presentation with all the principals so that they can actually look at their last year's FSA results and grad assessments and link them to some of the actions that the schools are doing. And my last thing I wanted to just highlight is in the careers department, we're happy and excited that our human services cohort, which literally was thought about 4 years ago before COVID, and is now actually launched. And we have 10 students with teacher Ed Seidel doing the human services cohort. They're not only taking a BCE 120 at VIU on Thursday nights, they're taking childcare giving and course and actually getting tons of accreditations this semester, and next semester they'll be out there doing practicum experiences. So we're super thrilled about that, and I'll update and point everyone to the education report by Trustee Young for all the other details, and we'll see people at the education committee meeting next month for more detailed, exciting news along the education front.
Ooh, I'd really like to hear more about the human services course. That's great, and nice for Mr. Seidel to pick up the pieces on that. 10 students, that's good. That's great. Any questions, trustees, of our Director of Instruction, Mr. Terpstra? Seeing none, over to our new chair of the Finance and Operations Committee of the Whole, Trustee Kellogg, and we have one recommendation, which materials was supplied today on the minor capital plan submission. Yet another thing we have to send to the ministry. Anyway, over to you, Trustee Kellogg.
All right. Recommendation that the Board of Education of School District 69, Qualicum, support the 2025-2026 minor capital plan submission as presented.
Now, this was Mr. Amos, can you help me? Did this get
Yep,
up with
absolutely.
the website package today, or because there's sort of two pieces to it? Yeah, go for it.
Sorry, yeah. Yes. So read the motion, and then what we'll do is we will basically present effectively.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. And Trustee Kellogg has moved, seconded by Trustee Young. Over to you for the breakdown. The list of items.
Yes, so I'm gonna share my screen. I'm gonna let Director of Operations Monroe speak to the items. And again, what it is, this is a carry forward of the annual cycle of major minor capital submissions that go to the ministry. And so the month of September is basically speaking to the minor capital. And basically it's about projects under 2.5 million. It includes, and you'll see on the screen shortly, it includes playgrounds, it includes carbon neutral capital programs, it includes school enrichment funds, enhancement funds, et cetera. So I'll let Director of Ops Phil Monroe speak to it as I shared my screen.
Over to you, Director Monroe.
Thank you, Secretary Treasurer Amos. As that's being shared there, I'm just going to quickly walk through it. But for clarity and contextual purposes, when we look at the Sept, which is the third category on the bottom there, the ministry has 63 million that they allocate to 60 school districts. In the 2.5 years that I've been here, and this is my third submission for Sept, I've never got more than 1.1 million in a year. So there is some strategy in the way that you frame your cases here, and we have a relationship with the ministry, and I asked them their thoughts on these things. But I will walk through it here a little bit. The CNCP there, I anticipate that we would likely get the top two, and these are in order of priority. The ministry likes us to load up 4 or 5 submissions in there, knowing that we're likely going to get 1 or 2. So with CNCP, we're likely to get 2. That's what we've got the last couple of years. And both of those, for the top one there for CNCP, Oceanside, and number 2 for Errington, they're the last 2 schools that we have that are not on the digital control, remote control for us to remotely access the set points for the HVAC controls. We actually have to go to those 2 schools in a vehicle and set those set points. So upgrading those will get us to having all of the district on a remote and access that from one location on a laptop. So that's for the CNCP. The third item there under CNCP, if we were to get it, would be advantageous. We're getting a, much like when I first joined the district, we had Prism audit 5 schools. They're doing another 5 school audit for us, the 5 that weren't done. We saw some utility cost reduction from that work that Prism did. And this is just anticipating the findings that they're going to find at Qualicum Secondary. And so the third request there would support the work that Prism's doing for us at the moment. When we look at the PEP, that's the playground funding. We went from getting around 195,000 a year for playground replacement to having alternating years now. We didn't get any PEP funding this year, so we anticipate that we will get it next year, and that will be to support the long-awaited playground at Springwood there. So that's what that one is. We won't get any more than one, but like I mentioned, the ministry wanted us to put in our priorities there for the next few years. For the SEP, and this is the bigger envelope that I had just mentioned there, 63 million for 60 school districts. I think we do well when we get around 1 million, considering some of the bigger districts. The 2 projects that I've put in there as the 1 and 2 priority are aligned with our strategic plan and priorities from an operational point of view. When we went through that strategic planning exercise, we had a lot of students there that participated, and some of the feedback was around the state of the washrooms, particularly in the secondary schools. We've heard that. We started the first phase of a multi-year rehabilitation program there, where Bolinas has got the change rooms upgraded to the tune of 600,000. They come online this Friday. The submission for this coming capital year would be to upgrade the central washrooms at Qualicum Secondary, along with the 300 wing washrooms at Bolinas. And so that's the top 2 priorities, and my anticipation and hope is that priority 1 and 2 get funded under SEP. And that's it, and happy to take any questions.
I'm also going to show you the FIP.
Oh, sorry, and the FIP, yes. Yeah, so the FIP, this program was launched about 18 months ago, and we've received 2 rounds of funding, and that has supported some of the work that's been done. It's upgraded many of the appliances in the elementary schools. It's built a foods program kitchen at Qualicum Secondary there in the summer. That's now online. And so I've put in for 110,000 to top up and finish off the work in the elementary schools, a little bit of work at Bolinas and Winchelsea to get a kitchen going at Winchelsea there. So that's just to round out some of the work we've already done.
That's Feeding Futures program infrastructure subcategory that in my world of wishes and things like that was to hope that the Feeding Futures would certainly provide us with a legacy on the ground. And this is the type of work that that's been able to accomplish. So trustees, does now, just to sort of get everybody together on any, the acronyms are as astounding as ever, but carbon neutral is CNCP, playground equipment, Sept is school enhancement programs, and now the additional one with the Feeding Futures gives us hands-on money for purchasing of things. Are there any questions, trustees, of the minor capital plan as presented? So this was moved by trustee Kellogg. Did we have a seconder? I've lost track a bit here. Trustee Young, did you? Thank you. Call the question. All those in favor? Carried. Any further comments, trustee Kellogg, about your first fins and ops report?
No, I have
Nope.
none.
Okay, great. Okay, policy committee. Oh my gosh, I'm back on the policy committee. That's been a few years. It's a bit rusty. So I thank you for the support of our superintendent, Dr. Jory, with this as the work goes forward, because I have to brush out the cobwebs. Board bylaw 1, the Board of Education, and in your packages, this is pages 78 to 85. I move that the Board of Education, School District 69 Qualicum, second reading to adopt the revisions to Board Bylaw 1, Board of Education. Could I have a seconder, please, trustees? Thank you, trustee Kellogg. As folks know, and just as a reminder, for our bylaw policy, be it bylaws or policy, we usually, unless something is needing an expedited process, we have 3 readings over the 3 months to entertain changes, or if things need to be deleted or policies removed. The process is to have 3 readings to which people can respond in between at the board committee of the whole meeting as we go along. So this is a motion on Board Bylaw 1 for second reading. Trustee Young.
Yeah, I was just gonna say what you said, which is we also will take into consideration any comments that come from everybody else. So that's why we want to get it out there.
Yep, so this is second reading, and I have a seconder. Are there any questions, trustees, further to that? I'll call a question. All those in favor? Carried. Board Bylaw 107, use of educational property for childcare. That the Board of Education School District 69 approve second reading to adopt the revisions to Board Policy 107, use of educational property for childcare. Could I have a seconder, please? Second, trustee Kellogg. This is mostly driven by ministry qualifiers that and we are now amending our motion to, or amending the policy to comply with that. Any questions, trustees? Seeing none, all those in favor? Carried. Wow, 2. I think there's going to be more. Longer list to come. The superintendent's nodding his head. Oh dear. Okay, Education Committee of the Whole, trustee Young, and the big package for tonight.
Yeah, big package. So I'm not going to belabor anything, but my report is on page 88, and I have not gotten as good as trustee Austin, but I do hope to achieve trustee Austin's reports. This meeting was a lot of kind of getting things going. And I do want to underline that we're really looking for presentations from students, educators, parents, and or caregivers to make presentations on environmental stewardship and climate action or on social justice and equity, or and on those topics, because we really want to highlight the work that is going on in those areas. The coffee with trustees discussion, unfortunately, that date doesn't work anymore, so we'll be back to the table around that one. And to move on, I will move that the Board of Education of School District 69 Qualicum approve the Framework for Enhancing Student Learning report as presented by Dr. Jory in a few minutes.
Could I have a seconder, please, trustees? Thank you, Trustee Kellogg. And now over to Superintendent Dr. Jory.
Thanks, everyone. For those of you in the audience that are really aware of the history of the FESL, essentially, school districts needed to submit reports annually to the ministry, and then there was a bit of a pause on that. And during that pause, the government got together and said, well, we actually want this information. We think the system needs and should and needs to provide it. And so they laid out some legislation to make that happen, and in accordance with everyone also having a strategic plan. So essentially, everyone has to have a strategic plan. Everybody needs to be achievement oriented, report on achievement. Here are essentially the 5 categories of achievement that you need to report out on. And one of the reasons that it's often spoken in the way that it is the rollout didn't maybe go as smoothly as perhaps they anticipated, and it was been a bit of an uneven road. And so there's some inside jokes, some amusement around all that. But what I'd like to say is despite all that, where it's landed is actually, I think, fairly effective. This document's pretty big, especially compared to the previous versions, and that's partially because not only are they asking us to do it, they're putting staff against reviewing it and then actually making comments and asking for ostensibly more information. I did a version a couple years ago where no one was going to look at it, and so I did it for the purposes of our school district. I wanted to be able to share it with the board and have them understand, and I didn't anticipate it was going to get more of an audience than that. And of course, as that machine got into motion, the document has had to kind of respond to that added scrutiny and those questions and respond to those questions. And the good news of it is it was a very interesting exercise this time around. I actually got to learn some things about our school district and some of the supports that we have in place that I didn't know very much about. And it's led to some deeper conversations. And I think that's the important part. It's not just that the ministry gets assurance, the government gets assurance that things are moving along as they should, and we're taking care of business. But the work that goes into the development of it, the deep dive into the data, the conversations with school staff should lead to actually development of more refined strategies, deeper thinking, and I believe it's actually having that impact. I'm optimistic that this is happening, and that the connection to our strategic plan is growing. One of the things, and this document, if you want to review it, it starts on page 90 or so. It's blue. The color shift ought to tip you. You can look at the there's a table of contents there. You can scroll through, but if you only look at one part, I would recommend that you go right to the very back. There's a little bit of a description of how we did our strategic plan process, the set model, so to speak. But more importantly, the connection between our strategic plan and the work that's going in our schools, and there's a chart at the very end there that outlines how we think those things are going to impact our results. And I think that's the part that I'm pleased with right now. Overall, our achievement profile is quite positive. We've made some gains, and relative to where we are demographically, I think we're showing some strength now, and certainly maybe even a bit of a bounce back, if you want to put it that way. But I really am liking the connection between the strategic plan, our schools, and our achievement outcomes. I think that's starting to get much clearer in everyone's mind, and so it's working. And I'm not actually thrilled to admit all that. I mean, I did have some cynicism about the vessel itself along the way. I have, like many people, but I have to admit, I think it's a good exercise for us, and I'm pleased with it. And I'll stop there.
There were much more fulsome review at the Education Committee meeting.
Yes.
But I think there were a number of points that I won't reiterate. But one of the things that I think is interesting is that the numeracy focus that we've had over the last few years seems to have paid off. And the other thing is, I had a note, still work to do on connection and resiliency. So I'm really excited about the integrated the ICY, because I think that we'll see a real bump in our numbers. And the other thing I wanted to say is we can do this as a compliance document. And I think some districts are probably doing that. But I think we're trying to use it. We're trying to make it a living document. And to Dr. Jory's comment, that chart, which is on, I believe, on page 24 of the report, which would make it on page 114 of the package, I think, is really, really interesting to me. So just to point out those things from my perspective.
Thank you, Trustee Young. No, I thought I saw Ms. Wilson's hand up. No. Any other comments, trustees? We did do a great deep dive into it at the Educational Committee of the Whole, which is what we hope to have at our Committee of the Wholes. So without further ado, I'll call a question. All those in favor? Carried. I think Barry, you're in favor. Okay, school codes of conduct. Trustee Young, you'll lead comments and the motion, and then Dr. Jory may want to add some comments as well.
Yes, I'm hopeful that Dr. Jory will add some comments here. School codes of conduct, yes. That the Board of Education of School District 69 Qualicum receive the school codes of conduct for the 2024-2025 school year as previously presented at the Education Committee of the Whole. And I think maybe, Dr. Jory, if you wouldn't mind speaking to timing as well.
Just a second, I need to have a seconder, please, to have the motion on the floor. Thank you, Trustee. Oh, I've got the hiccups. Oh, dear. Trustee Austin. And I guess you'll deal with the highlight, which you also dealt with in your superintendent's reports on cell phones as the key change. Superintendent Jory.
Yeah. So this is our second year in a new format. We did strike a committee and basically adopted a district-wide template. Each school code of conduct now has a matrix which they've selected or developed at the school level. There's a series of items that we've agreed that everyone must have, and then there's the other items that are legislative in nature, need to be in a school code of conduct. As many of you already know well, our intention with this new version is to get away from that more punitive model of if a student does this, then this bad thing happens to them, and try to come to a place where we are intentionally developing a very positive learning environment, and that we're aspiring to be respectful and be good citizens and to focus on our learning and to articulate that in an aspirational way. And so that work, that rollout has gone fairly well. And of course, the one addition as of late is the cell phone piece. And so because the legislation had changed and it was coming, we knew it was coming, it was a late addition, we were able to kind of anticipate what that was going to look like and put that phrasing in that supports distraction-free learning environment. And so all of our school level codes of conduct have that in. How much detail they provide is entirely up to them, because it needs to be an authentic collaboration or consultation process at the school level. We're compelled to speak to students, staff, and parents on that code of conduct as the school staff develops it. And so that's very important. And ultimately, it all has to work at that level. And so if it's not earnest, if we just, comes from above and pushes in there, it's not going to be taken very seriously. And so it's really an important part of the process. So it's going to look a little different, but generally speaking, the template is the template. The intention is the intention. And so here are our latest versions for you to approve. Before we move on though to that motion, two things. One, we do have a good process to review it. I've really been admired that each year in the spring, our principals collect feedback. There's a form for that. They highlight the pieces of the strategy or the codes of conduct that are being impacted by that, and then they submit that in a package to our executive secretary, and then she shares that in a folder with myself to review before it goes to the board. And I think this is a very good process. But I think what if I'm reading this right, Trustee Young has got some questions around the order of operations and is wondering if maybe the dates could be changed to make more sense. So I'll turn that back to her to comment.
Trustee Young, because it is the school year has started, and
yeah, that's my point. Is can we get these to our last board meeting of the year, or even our August board meeting, which is a weird one, but so that we're looking at them before they get sent out to students and parents, if they come to those board meetings or seeing them ahead of time. It just seems like the process is a little bit strange.
So, Superintendent Dr. Jory, do you think it can be moved back such that it comes in May or the work by the schools, because the schools also need to consult with students and parents and things like that. So before they go off on summer holidays, can we fit that in and rejig the time frame?
I think so. I think August is a great time to have these shared and received. I was curious why we did it in September. I was just sort of going along with it. and I find that our August meeting could use a little more content, and so I think that's a great change. We'll endeavor to do that.
I sort of have some strange recollection that it was a ministry thing that we had to have in by October, but maybe I'm way too back in history or something, but because really we would like those kind of documents ready for parents and caregivers to receive once they've, walked in, and kids to receive once they walk into school. So it can make every endeavor to shift the calendar a bit on that.
If I may, just add one more comment. We all need to look at these as living documents. You're receiving them in a point in time. And if it were brought to the attention of our school principal that there was some flaw or something that could be just a little bit better, I think they should have the license to go ahead and make those changes on the fly, with a consultation in place. However, I think it's a great idea for once a year for you to have a check-in, and I agree. I think that check-in should be prior to the startup. That makes more sense to me as well.
Great. We'll shift the calendar by a couple of months. So this was moved by Trustee Young, seconded by Trustee Austin. Are there any further questions, trustees? Seeing none, call the question. All those in favor? Carried. I think, Barry, you're carried. Let's go with that. No reports from representative or outside organizations. Trustee items, we have internal, external committees and liaisons, and I also have Trustee Young wanting to review her early years report and the Qualicum First Nations learning bins. So let's start off with, in your package, folks, you have the external district committee representatives. I think Trustee Young, you queried with me the Early Learning Child Care Council, ELCO, to be presenting, or Trustee Austin was going to ask if they would like to go to the Oceanside Building and Learning Committee as well. Do you maybe want to flesh out that, because you're on both, or you're named on both, and I think Trustee
No.
Austin said she'd be the alternate, so.
Yeah, no, my understanding, and I'll check with Trustee Austin on this, was that she was going to do the ELCO work.
Okay.
And she was going to ask ELCO if they could approach the early years table, what you're calling the Oceanside Building and Learning Coalition still.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Well, that's what it is. Yep.
Yeah, we should
Yeah.
change the title on that actually. But
Okay.
anyway, that they were so that we could have a bit of cross purposes, but there was never an understanding from my point of view that I was taking on ELCO. So
Okay.
check with Trustee Austin.
Is that your understanding, Trustee Austin, that we?
That's exactly my
Yep.
understanding. I'll
Great.
stay with ELCO, but I am going to ask them if they could have somebody sit on that early learning table.
Ms. Wilson, you sort of had your hand up there and things like that. Is it sort of, okay, okay. And so the rest of the committee and representative appointments are as listed. And that will be for the following year. Trustee Young.
Yeah, sorry about this. When are we going to decide about the DPAC? Can we do that at some
Yep,
other meeting, or?
Yep, no, we can do that. Then throw your hands up at what you want and let me know and we'll slot it in.
Oh, okay.
Trustee
Fair
Kellogg
enough.
kicked us off with attending the DPAC meeting in September. And so everybody can make their choices and let us know, and let our executive assistant Karen Herc know, and pick and choose. We sort of all can get in 2 or 3. Doesn't all work out that way necessarily, but choose a way, first come, first serve. How's that?
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, and then also attached in your agenda this evening was the liaison schools. There's been some shifting around. We are into half of our term, and it's good for people to move around. So these are included in your package as to which school the trustee is liaison with for purposes of communication to the board or attending events and the like. So
My
I'll
hand
call
up for a little bit.
Oh,
I've
sorry,
had my hand up
sorry.
for a bit, Eve.
Sorry, go
Because
ahead.
I think at the very
It's
beginning
right
of the
over
meeting,
your logo. It's right over your logo. So I can't
because
see it.
I asked that we throw committee reports somewhere, and I think this was where it was going to be thrown under
Sure,
committees.
go ahead.
Anyway, I just wanted to, as a preamble, we had left the school year at the end of June, leaving it that we were going to look at, changing our, what would it look like if we changed our meeting times and or recording. We revisited that at policy committee, our last policy committee, because it was part of a policy or sort of. So we had the discussion there, and ultimately it was decided that nothing is going to change. So I suppose what I wanted to say is, if there isn't the appetite to record meetings, I would really, really encourage who's ever writing the committee reports to be very full and detailed, and try to catch that flavor of conversation that is happening at these meetings, because I'm finding them a little bit flat, and they're not capturing the essence of what's happening, which is one of the things a recording might do. But in lieu of that, if there's conversation, well, frankly, like we had at policy committee, I think that should be reflected in the policy committee report, the flavor of those conversations, perhaps even, who said what, that kind of thing. Otherwise, Elaine has said she thinks that the minutes are the official representation of these meetings and recordings aren't. But if that's the case, then I think we really have to endeavor to create very full reports that really capture the conversations.
Thanks, Trustee Austin. Point taken. Yep. No, we all want to try and be fulsome, and some of it though can come
Keith?
2 and 3 times. Yep. No, I'm
My
coming to you
hands
next.
up.
Yep. No, coming to you next.
Anyways, I shared at the DPAC meeting that because the decision's been made for this year, but I think it's left up to the committees that whatever committee I'm heading next year, whatever committee it is, that I am going to be willing to record it. So that can be on the record. I will do that.
Thanks, Trustee Kellogg. Okay, over to Trustee Young to early years report that you wish to elaborate on from the consent agenda, which is page 24, 25, and then the Qualicum First Nation bins presentation that you went to.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to pull that report because it was a kind of different meeting from what we usually have. And I did the notes on it. So, it's a full report. What we did was we went around to all the people around the table and we talked about the resources that those groups provide. So I think it's a particularly good one for all of us, parents and caregivers in particular, to be aware of, because there's a ton of resources out there. And I also wanted to highlight that the Coombs Candy Walk is coming up, Trustee Austin, on Halloween night, I think. And that's a really big event. And also Spooktacular, which is a huge event that happens at Storybook Village, is also on that list. So I just didn't want people to miss that report. That's all.
Okay, and how about the Qualicum First Nations celebration of their learning bins?
Yes, that's, we used to do highlights, right? And this is a huge highlight of my last month, which has had a lot of highlights. But these bins were fabulous. And I know that I wasn't the only person there. Trustee Kellogg was there and Trustee Kurland was there as well. And I don't know if other trustees showed up afterwards, but lots of dignitaries and so on, like Qualicum Council and all kinds of people. But the bins themselves were just fabulous. And the information was pulled from so many different places. And where there wasn't information, they had created it. And so I just wanted to do a huge shout out. These are going all over the province. This is huge for the nation. And it's just, it's truth, and thank you.
Yep, they are wonderful. Trustee Kellogg.
Sorry about that. Yeah, I just wanted to comment that I was there and I was extremely impressed. They were so wholesome and just the creation of all the different characters. It was wonderful. And the stories, I had somebody that took me around and talked to me about each of the bins that I looked at. They were quite incredible. I was totally impressed.
I think these bins have been available also through our DRC to classrooms and schools, and they can access them through the nation. And so hopefully our liaison workers are also promoting them as well, because they are fabulous. Any further comments under trustee items? Anybody, did I forget somebody to add a comment or a trustee highlight or anything that they want to shout out about? Okay, then public question period. Are there any questions? Hands raised, please, so that I can see you. if there are questions from the public this evening. Seeing none, I will then think that everybody has had a full evening of all of what's been happening in the district and beyond. And so could I ask for a mover to adjourn tonight's meeting? Thank you, Trustee Kellogg. Have an enjoyable evening, folks, what little is left of it. And we will see everyone next month or at committee of the whole meetings in between. And everyone take a moment in time to reflect on National Truth and Reconciliation day on Monday, that we have lots of calls to action to pick one, choose one, and reflect on or do some learning with. And thank you, Ms. Tickels, for your early definitions and interpretations of your Truth and Reconciliation journey. It was very informative. Thank you. Okay, guys, have a pleasant evening.
Thank you.